Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Institute of Directors webinar on resilience at work, both at home and in the office. I'm Nick Bradley. I'm the founder of Mandala Leaders, an executive coaching business, and also an ambassador for the Institute of Directors. I'm delighted we've got some great speakers on the session today, and welcome to you all to join that. The format is roughly, we're going to have each of the speakers speaking for 5 or 7 minutes each on their particular element of this subject. And then we'll go to a Q&A. So if you have any questions that come to mind during the session, please put them in the chat and I'll pick them up at the end, and then we'll have a panel of all the speakers covering the questions. Hopefully that's clear to everyone. We're going to hopefully wrap up in under an hour, because I know we all have a bit of Zoom fatigue and we've all got lots of other Zoom meetings and other things to do today. So my job is to run the time and introduce the speakers. They're going to be the ones doing the hard work today. So I'd like to start off by introducing our first speaker, which is Charlie Hodgson. Charlie is a Yorkshireman, went to Bradford Grammar School, and has since developed incredibly well in the sphere of rugby union. Charlie played for Sale Sharks, for Saracens, for England and the British and Irish Lions, and has won many awards and accolades. And Charlie has now converted everything he's learned in the sports sphere into business and is helping business leaders. So Charlie, over to you.
Good morning, everybody. I trust you're keeping safe and well. Nick, thank you very much for the kind introduction. I know I've roughly got 5 or 6 minutes to talk about resilience. So I figured the best way to do this would be to share a little bit of my own story, and hopefully it will give you an inkling as to why I am here today. So I want you to picture the scene. Imagine you yourself, you're standing in the professional sporting arena. Some of you may find it easier than others, but you're being watched by 80,000 people plus a few million people watching it around the world on TV. You've got the pressure of the expectation of your country, your teammates, your family, friends, plus the opposition of trying to stop you from achieving what you want. It's one of the first times you've ever really stepped foot on a professional playing field. How do you think you'd feel? How do you think you would manage with that pressure, with that that environment that you've been exposed to? Well, this was me back in 2004 playing for England. It was 12 months post the World Cup win in 2003 when England had just beaten Australia, and I was now representing my country in a repeat grudge match. It was high pressure, loads and loads of media attention, an expectation that I'd never ever experienced before. And whilst I was captain in 2001, basically through selection, knockbacks and lots of serious injury, really, my main opportunity didn't really come until 2004, what I've just touched upon. And I was subject to a serious amount of sledging, which I'd never ever experienced before. Now, I'd heard that sledging went on in cricket, but in rugby, certainly rugby union, where the crowds are very respectful and the players are very respectful, never ever experienced anything like this. And so in this particular game against Australia, 2 players in particular made a conscious effort to come and stand near me when I was kicking at goal. And this is unheard of. They don't tend to do that very often. There was no need for them to be anywhere near me, but they actually made a conscious effort to try and abuse me, trying to get in my head. And if I'm honest, they made a very good showing of it. And so much so, they impacted my performance. I missed a few kicks at goal that day. They knocked me off what I was thinking. The pressure really got to me. I really couldn't cope with that pressure because I was so inexperienced. And I missed a few kicks, and we ended up losing the game by a couple of points. But you move into the game finishes. We're obviously very disappointed, but you move into the media scrum straight afterwards before you can see your friends and family. And they'd noticed that it had happened in the game. They noticed these 2 players had come near me, and they asked me, and they said, "Look, well, what was going on in your head?" And I said, "Yeah, if I'm honest," and I was pretty honest in my appraisal. I said, "If I'm honest, I think they really got to me. I think they made life really difficult for me. They said a few things, so much so that they put me off, and I think it was probably one of the reasons why I missed a few kicks." Anyway, 12 hours later in the media, boom, this whole thing had just exploded. I bottled it, I choked it, I should never play for England again. I suddenly became embroiled in this media scrutiny, which quite frankly I'd never experienced before, never really anticipated, never really expected. But the impact, the long-term impact was massive, not just professionally, but personally as well. I mean, this sort of weakness, this tagline stuck with me for months and months through the media, through the opposition crowd. I think even some of my own players probably didn't trust me at certain times because there'd been this whole negative spin brought about by one performance. But personally as well, I'm from a typical northern family. We don't show emotions at all. I've never seen my old man cry. I'm reasonably introverted, so it almost caused me to go into myself even more. I withdrew myself from social situations. It had a negative impact on friendships. It had a negative impact on the relationship with my girlfriend, who thankfully is now my wife. But it was probably one of the lowest points of my career because I simply did not know how to deal with it, and it was that unbelievable setback for my career. But I guess at the time I recognized the need to do something about it. Otherwise I would never have had the 16-year career that I eventually had, and thankfully I had. And I was either going to get smashed to smithereens, or I managed to sort of bend and flex like a little bit of bamboo, which ultimately is what we're talking about with resilience here. And you learn to manage the situation as best as possible. I know I haven't got time, so I won't talk about everything, but I'm going to share two things with you which were really beneficial for me, and I think also are very much applicable to what we're going through right now with the current coronavirus. The first one was acceptance. Unless you accept the situation that you're in, whether we're at home or working from home or working at home with families, unless we really accept the situation, we're not able to move forward. We're not able to adapt to the new environment that we're in. We're always thinking about the past. We're always thinking about the negative of the past, and we can't therefore move forward. So the big thing for me was acceptance, accepting that I was there. Perhaps performances hadn't been the way they should have been, and I needed to do something about it, and I could adapt to that situation. And the second thing was about being in control. You hear a lot of sports people talk about controlling the controllables. I knew that I didn't become a bad kicker overnight, so I just had to reflect on. I had to reflect on what I did, my technique, when I did it, how much I trained. So much so that when I went out onto the field on a Saturday, I was in complete control. There's going to be no distractions that were going to get away with me. And you liken it to the situation that we're in now, when you can open your phone up and you can see unbelievable amount of media attention on the pandemic. And quite frankly, sometimes you don't know whether it's right or whether it's wrong. So it's almost like creating boundaries, and that, for me, is creating that control that you find yourself in. So resilience, I guess, it only comes from experiencing some sort of setback. But I think it's important that you create your own, I call it a resilience plan, really, so that you're prepared as best as possible. At the end of the day, we do need stress to perform. You just got to ask any sports person that. But understanding that it's only a temporary issue is going to go a long way to stopping it from becoming a chronic problem. Thank you, Nick.
Charlie, thank you very much indeed. Having that crisis moment in your career helped you realise the need to build resilience, and you've done that very successfully. I mean, I'm not going to ask you who the two Australian players were. I'm sure you'd be far too discreet to share that. Maybe I'll have to go watch a replay of the match itself.
I don't mind you asking.
Thank you, Charlie. I really appreciate that, and you've kept that to time really nicely. That's a really good structure for the other speakers. So thank you, Charlie, and we'll move on to Karl Pemberton. Karl is, like myself, actually, a lifelong banker, and he's worked across the North East in Yorkshire through his career, helping people make the most of their money. And Karl is also the chair of one of the Institute of Directors branches up in the North East. So, and is also an award winner of Institute of Directors Awards. So, Karl, over to you.
Thanks, Nick, and thanks, Charlie. Yeah, good morning, everybody. And as Nick said, I'm an MD of a financial services firm. I'm also the chair of the IOD in this area. So on paper, nothing gives me any qualifications to talk to you about mental health. However, I wanted to talk to you this morning more from personal experience of running a team that has struggled with mental health, and how we can potentially help them within our businesses and as leaders within our own businesses. And as a leader within a business, I think it's fair to say that many feel as though it's not our job to talk about mental health. Feel free to click through the slides, Helena, by the way, apologies. This is a condensed version of something that I do for the IOD on a regular basis, so it's not, I won't kill you with slides. Yeah, it's something that, you know, we feel as though as managers, as leaders, as directors within a business, you know, if an issue is caused at home, it's not our place to get involved. We shouldn't ask. However, there was a massive change with the Equality Act in 2010, which basically said, you know, we have a responsibility and we have to deal with our people if it has a long-term adverse effect on their ability to perform normal day-to-day duties. So we do have a duty to ask our staff how they are. We've also got duties under health and safety legislation to make sure that any stress-related ill health, whether it's arising from work-related activities, you know, we have to make sure that we control those risks. So to say it's not our place to get involved, it's not our place to ask, now's not the time to be avoiding those issues if we are leading businesses. Click forward, Helena. The scary reality is, up until that Mental Health and Discrimination Act of 2013, there was so many jobs you weren't allowed to do if on paper you had a diagnosed mental health conditions. And believe it or not, you weren't allowed to be a GP, you weren't allowed to be an MP, you weren't allowed to be a teacher, serve on a jury, and believe it or not, you weren't allowed to be a company director if you had a medically diagnosed mental health conditions. And that's only coming up, well, as it is, 7 years ago now. And it seems weird, doesn't it? Because that's not that long ago in reality, but scary that you can't do or you couldn't do those roles. If you click, Helena. As a business, I don't know how many of you are actually running businesses and employ lots of people, but these figures came from Mind, the mental health charity. And as Charlie was alluding to earlier, it affects a lot more people than you would assume. With a recent survey last year actually saying 1 in 6 workers experience those depressions, anxieties and stresses at any one time. It's even worse for company directors, which I presume we all are who are on the call today. So 1 in 4, so probably 5 or 6 of us are going to be experiencing it at any one time. And obviously in the last 5 years, stress being one of the biggest reasons why people take time off. On that basis though, presenteeism, I don't know if you've ever heard the phrase, presenteeism actually accounts for 1.5 times as many people taking time off. That's people who come to work when they're not right and actually don't operate to their best or fullest abilities. So not asking is not an option in today's world. You can flick through this slide altogether, Helena, apologies. There's some percentages actually on there about people who are so stressed, how many people actually in the UK feel that. Some startling figures. And the cost to your business is ridiculous when you look at it in pound amounts. And, you know, you cannot ignore that fact. Now, going on to the realities of what happened in my business, as I said, I'm not actually qualified to talk about it, but I'm probably qualified in terms of real examples. That was my team a couple of years ago. On the face of it, they're all vibrant, smiley, happy, brilliant people. And to the outside world, you wouldn't think any of them have got a single issue going on in their lives. However, in 2017, the following started to happen all within about a 6-month period. We had to deal with all of these issues as a team. I'll let that sink in, but that's just 10 different things. And the team is about 25 strong, and they're only the 10 that I could fit on the page. So nearly 50% of our workforce suddenly had what I would call a catastrophic, unplanned, terrible incident that happened, nothing to do with work. And suddenly, as a vibrant, growing, profitable and well-respected business, everything that we'd worked for could be undone through things far beyond our control. Now, I've not experienced anything like this in the past. How do I deal with that as a company director? You know, it certainly put me out of my comfort zone, but I had to act, and we had to act, and we had to change. On to the next slide, Helena. So the one thing that we had to do, first of all, I always use visual aids, by the way. We had to change hats. We had to change hats quickly. And suddenly we couldn't just be seen as a boss. We couldn't be seen as a director anymore. We had to put our arms around people, and we had to reassure them that everything was okay. We had to spend time with people. And that was a case of, you know, taking time out of our schedules and actually put our arms around these people, take them to one side and make sure that they were being listened to. I think there is a massive fear in encouraging people to open up, in the fact that they feel as though they're burdening us as leaders, but that is not the case. And we had to make sure we put our workloads to one side to actually commit time to these people so that they felt that they were being listened to. I've already mentioned there, listen to, but we had to then, the hardest thing when you listen to somebody, and hopefully we'll all understand this, is we had to try and understand. Now, that is a very difficult thing to do if you're not in that situation. Charlie alluded to earlier that some of those anxieties he was feeling was from being on that field of play in rugby. Now, I would presume none of us have been in that position, so it's really difficult for us to understand how he was feeling at that time. But you have to try and put all of your own preconceived ideas to one side and actually try and understand, or at least let the individual involved know that you are trying to understand their situation. We then try to give people time. The one thing we didn't want people to do was feel as though they had to be in work and they had to be performing at the best of their abilities, otherwise their job would be under pressure. We give people time to actually take time out and actually not worry about work. It seemed a very strange thing to do as a director, but ultimately giving people that time to concentrate on themselves was more important than them trying to focus on us as a business. And that then reassured them that they were being supported by us as a business, and that they genuinely had, or we genuinely had, their best interests at heart, which took then the pressure away from them, which again, Charlie will allude to this, that when you feel that you're in that situation, you feel that extra pressure, that extra burden, and you don't want to burden those other people with it. So taking that pressure away and lifting that weight off the shoulders is an absolute a must in that situation. We then offered support, something that we consciously did. We approached a counselling service, and we offered all of our team, irrespective of whether they've come to us or not, or whether we were aware or not of any problems, we actually said, we've agreed a deal with this counselling service. We will simply get a bill. We will, go to them directly. We don't know who's been, we don't know what you've spoken about, but if you need to speak to somebody and you still don't want to speak to us as leaders, feel free to speak to this individual. And it gave them that independence and confidence, again, if there was any concerns, because again, it's not easy to suddenly speak up. And as that last slide showed, ultimately, we'd like to regard ourselves as a family, and we want to make sure everyone felt supported in what they do. And the screen that's actually on at the moment is the feedback that we got from our team, from people who've worked in lots of different industries over lots of years, was absolutely fantastic. And at a time of crisis, it certainly opened my eyes to how we should lead in those situations. And hopefully we as a business, yes, it might have cost us £500 to give some counselling sessions to some individuals, but that £500 as an investment rather than a cost is nothing. It's an absolute fraction compared to what it could have cost us as a business if presenteeism actually set in, or if we had any long-term sick. And genuinely, I don't think we had anybody throughout that whole crisis who actually took long-term sick through that, in what were some horrible and pretty dire situations. So I think onto last couple of pointers on those slides, how I would summarize is, we have an obligation to show an interest and be aware. We have to be open-minded. We can't have any preconceived ideas, and we have to try and understand, as difficult as that might be. You don't genuinely know how much of a difference that you can make to those individuals. And then in yourself, you have to be open. You have to only do what you want and like to do, which is part of another presentations. And trust me, as Charlie says, you know, you're not going to be the only person feeling that way and feeling difficult. And I think that just about wraps up my my few moments there from a leadership point of view in that type of crisis.
Karl, thank you very much for walking through that. It's very interesting to ensure that you do know what's going on for your team personally in their family, because they have a major impact on their ability to do the job and a major impact on their own well-being. And I was going to say by paying for some counselling, or actually you use the word investing in those people, has really reaped rewards for them individually and for the business. So I think that's a really nice summary. Thank you very much, Karl. Much appreciated. If anyone has any questions for Charlie, Karl, or any of our other speakers, please put them in the chat. If you can't find the chat, look across the bottom of your screen. There's a little speech bubble with the word chat to it. Click on that. Drop your comments in there as well, and we will come on to the questions as we reach the end of all of our speakers. But now it's an opportunity to move on to our next speakers. And these two come in a double act. Jane Garvey and Margaret Allison comes a double act. For 35 years of working in Barclays Bank, they actually job shared for 25 of those. So they've been working hand in hand for a long, long time. And through their career in Barclays, they got diplomas in performance coaching, and they got accreditation and CPD certified trainers for resilience, stress awareness in the workplace, and performance appraisal training. But since they left Barclays, both Jane and Mag saw an opportunity to branch out and spend time doing what they love most, which is helping others to achieve their ambitions and overcome any barriers to allow them to become the best that they can be. So without further ado, over to the double act that is Jane and Mags.
Thanks, Nick. I'm Jane, and we've been asked to talk about the well-being of people working from home in the current COVID-19 situation.
Jane, just I'll stop there. Because you're working together, we've got your sound coming back out of Mags's speaker. So one of you could mute while the other is speaking, that would be great. Thank you. So back to you, Jane.
Okay. Yeah, so thanks again, Nick. So we've been asked to talk to you today about the well-being of people working from home in the current COVID-19 situation. And it was great to hear from Karl. I think lots of things that we'd like to advise employers he's put in place for his people, which is fantastic, and he just showed what a difference that makes. So there's no doubt that over recent years, with benefits of technology enhancements, we've seen some move towards working from home. And prior to COVID-19, approximately 70% of full-time corporate employees globally work from home at least one day a week. And the evidence pointed to positive benefits such as improved work-life balance and increased satisfaction and productivity, which I've certainly witnessed firsthand. However, it's important to note that that evidence is based primarily on studies of individuals who chose to work from home. And in addition, the move will have been done with the benefit of having the time to consider technology and any other adjustments that they might need to make. So if we compare this to the current situation where thousands and actually over 1 billion globally of individuals being forced to work from home every day, and they've been given no time to consider how that will properly work and no end date to those arrangements. There's no doubt that for some it will suit those employees, but if you're a gregarious individual used to working in a buzzing office one day and then find yourself sat at your kitchen table the next on your own, what does that mean for your well-being and morale? So we're just going to spend the next few minutes looking at ways that employers can help their teams through this difficult period, and then go on to how individuals can help themselves.
Thanks, Jane. Helena, could we have our slides up, please? The third slide, please. And the next one, that's great, thank you. Okay, so now I'm going to look at some everyday work-related pressures, but then at lockdown, the sudden move to home working into the balance. I've detailed 5 key pressures on our slide, but as time is limited, I've chosen to focus on the one highlighted.
Max, I'm going to have to interrupt you, I'm afraid. We've got the same problem with feedback with your microphone there. I don't know if you've got 2 devices open or you're using a separate microphone.
Yeah. My move. Yeah, okay, sorted, I think.
Better. Okay, great, back to you, thank you.
Okay, is that better?
Yeah, keep going. I'll stop you if it's not, put it that way.
Is that better?
Yes, thank you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, please continue.
Okay. Okay, so I've heard lots of examples of employees under massive amounts of pressure with responsibilities at an all-time high. And we rightly recognise that this situation is stressful straight away. But just as stressful can be a change from a busy job to a full day stretching ahead with less to do or a lack of clarity on expectations, leading to feelings of guilt and doubt of self-worth. So what can we do to help? First of all, be clear on new expectations. Everything has been thrown up into the air, so it cannot be BAU. Set productivity levels and targets, if applicable, at a realistic level and communicate them clearly. Secondly, it's important to recognise that some employees will need increased support on how to focus and motivate themselves to be more productive. So team leaders need to learn how to lead from a distance and replicate the support they would normally give in a different way. Next, aim to strike a balance between setting expectations of working hours to provide clarity and giving some freedom to employees to make decisions to flex these hours where possible and choose break times to suit their personal circumstances. This gives them a degree of control back, which in an uncontrollable environment will have a massive impact. For example, an ex-colleague of mine has 3 children under 5 and was really struggling alongside his wife to cope whilst working from home. Initially, he took some holidays and reduced to a 3-day week, but the work built up in his absence, just increasing the stress. He revisited options with his manager and now works from 7 AM to 12 PM and then 2 hours in an evening, which is working much better. Obviously, this agreement would need the cooperation and buy-in of the whole team to succeed, but does show the benefits of exploring all options. Another key area to think about is that if you're responsible for scheduling calls, ensure you allow some downtime in between. A member of my family told me she had just 30 minutes break from Skype calls in a full day, and she has a 10-year-old son at home. I personally would question how anyone can engage and be productively consistent over that period of time. And subsequently, she's actually taken some time off sick just due to the stress of this situation, which is totally out of character for her. If we were in the office, we'd be moving around from one meeting to another, chatting with colleagues along the way, or travelling in the car to clients, listening to the radio or our favourite music. Unknowingly, these times give us a break, time for social interaction or for some personal headspace, and we still need this. And finally, actively encourage employees to take a mental and physical break, exercise and participate in non-work related activities. This undoubtedly will help to reduce stress and improve productivity. Next slide, please, Helena. Okay, so moving on to what individuals can do to help themselves, I've summarised these under 3 headings, starting with stay focused. Start your day on a positive note. Don't forget that you're there to work, so set yourself up right away. Wherever you are working, make it as separate as your day-to-day home life as you possibly can, and think about introducing a new routine that signals the start and end of the working day. Get into the habit of writing a to-do list each morning or night. Agree priorities with your manager and how they will be reviewed to give you certainty that you're on the right track. And manage distractions so that you aren't constantly breaking focus from work. As mentioned previously, agreeing a working pattern with your manager if you have children at home that need caring for. Next, stay connected. Agree with your line manager what frequency and type of contact is required. Try not to rely too much on email. Pick up the phone or ideally use video. It is much more sociable to be able to see the person you are talking to. A friendly smile from a colleague, friend or family member can make a huge difference to your day. Keep informed. It's good to stay updated on progress being made in combating the virus, but limit your news intake and try not to obsess. I think it's inevitable that the majority of us will have our down days during this period. Remember, we are all in it together and there will be someone to talk to who understands how you are feeling. Don't suffer alone. Reach out. And finally stay active. Exercise is not only good for your physical health, but also your mental health. whether it's a local walk or cycle or dialing into free online workouts, keep moving. Get some fresh air, leave your desk for your lunch break. Take advantage of being at home by taking a walk to blow the cobwebs away. Getting out into the fresh air on a daily basis is probably the most frequently mentioned positive I've heard over the last few weeks. The word active here relates not just to exercise, but to anything that benefits your well-being, brings you enjoyment, and distracts you from your current challenges. Everyone likes different things, but examples are cooking, reading, art projects, or listening to music. And I'll hand you over to Jane. If you pass on to the next slide, Helena, please.
So we've gone through quite a bit in a short space of time, and I thought it would be useful to pull out what I feel are the 3 key takeaways for you, either as an employer or employee, and they're up on the screen. I think the vital next step for employers is to start planning an exit strategy of their own as government plans are released, which I'd recommend is implemented with the 3 key takeaways at the forefront to ensure your employees are fully on board with the strategy you adopt. Thanks for listening, and happy to answer any questions at the end.
Thank you, Max and Jane. Thank you very much indeed. A little bit of feedback in the middle of that, but I think we've managed to get most of the points through, and the slides certainly help for us to read the headlines of what you're saying. I think that's a great point, though. A lot of us are thinking about the current situation where people are working from home, but also it's going to be just as important how we release people back into the workplace, in what way, at what pace, and what our employees need to make sure they are successful when we push them back into whatever the new normal is. So thank you very much indeed. Again, if you have any more questions, I've got a few coming through. Please put the questions into the chat box, otherwise we'll come to Q&A after our last speaker. And we'll have quite a bit of time to do that, which is brilliant. But I'd like to introduce Charlotte Armitage. Charlotte is an accredited principal practitioner psychologist, I think I got that right, with the Association of Business Psychologists, and is also undertaking a doctorate in counselling psychology. Charlotte runs the YAFTA consultancy, helping businesses and individuals through their mental health. She's also a regular contributor to the media and public speaker on mental health and other associated issues. So Charlotte, over to you and welcome. And you need to take yourself off mute, Charlotte.
Sorry.
There we go. Welcome, Charlotte.
Hello there. Hi. So I wanted to speak about the situation really. We started off, we've all had our routines fundamentally. Routine is the bedrock of healthy psychological functioning. And all of a sudden our routines were just wiped from us, and we ended up in this position where we
I think we might have lost Charlotte there. Helena, have you anything on to help me with that?
You want to just go on to some questions, Nick, while we wait for us to come back?
Yeah, let's do that. Thank you, Helena. Obviously, we've just lost Charlotte. One of the problems of Zoom calls is that the technology or our ability to manage the technology is always going to be a challenge. But routine is the bedrock of healthy psychological functioning, I just heard from Charlotte, which is quite a good starting point. But let's jump into a couple of questions. Charlie, I'm going to start with you, if that's all right. A question for me in Ghana. You were talking about sledging, particularly for the Australians, and we've all experienced that in rugby and cricket. But is sledging just another form of cheating, or in the workplace, even bullying?
Yeah, I mean, you could certainly look at it as bullying. I'm not necessarily sure it's cheating in the sporting context, but I certainly would agree with you when you're talking about the bullying side. But at the end of the day, it happens, and I think from my point of view, I was too inexperienced to be able to deal with it. I got capped at 21 years old, and like I said, I was really inexperienced. And I look back and think, actually, mentally, I wasn't ready. I wasn't prepared for those moments. And I suppose I wish I had done. I think if I'd been capped later in my career, I'd have been in a much better position to deal with it. So, yeah, I mean, it's certainly something you can't stamp out. You can't stop it from happening because it happens all the time. So I think it's more of an acceptance than anything else.
Acceptance was a point you made during your chat earlier, and I think that's a very valid one. accepting the situation that you're in, accepting your own abilities, and building from there. Is that right?
Completely, yeah. I mean, I often share, when I talk sometimes, I often share a story of a good friend of mine, Will Fraser, who I played at Saracens with. His brother Henry had an awful accident, and he dived into the sea, hit his head on a covered sand dune, and was paralysed from the neck down. And he's one of the most inspirational characters you could come across now. And one of the main quotes that he uses is accept and adapt. And for somebody in that position who has accepted his new way of being, his new life, is really, really powerful. And I think talking to Will and his family, they said, look, if he's accepted the situation, then we can't be drowning our sorrows, thinking of this, thinking of what's happening. If he's happy, we have to be happy as well. And that kind of that's the way it is. And it's really powerful.
It is absolutely very powerful. Thank you, Charlie. Karl, can I come to you for the next question? It's come from Paul Ryan, who is another local York rugby man. With the trend towards more international, global and matrix managed teams, how are we better able to identify some of the key triggers with colleagues when we're not as close to those people as we would like to be?
Yeah, I saw the question come through, and I think the ladies were talking when I actually read it, and they made the valid point that it was one of our biggest concerns, let's say, because when all of this started, should I say, because our culture within our business and camaraderie that we have and tight-knit feel within our team, when all of this happened and everybody suddenly started working remotely, one of our biggest concerns was, how do we make sure everybody's all right? Because everybody deals with this in a different way. Everybody will react at a different time to how they're feeling. I think it was an IOD session I was on a couple of months ago. It probably was now at the start of all of this. I think you gents may have been on it as well, about the curve of how you feel during this. And everybody's going to feel high or low at a different time. And what the ladies were talking about in terms of touching base is paramount. We've used a lot of FaceTime. We've used a lot of WhatsApp and video calls, not necessarily Zoom, but we've done that individually. And, you know, there is a reality that unless you look in the whites of somebody's eyes, it is hard to judge how they're feeling. You don't get that sense that you would in a normal office environment of, you know, pretty much within a few moments of walking into an office, what the mood is like, how everybody is feeling. And you can pick up certainly far quicker than you can in situations like this, can't we? And I do think that constant, not constant, because I think that would annoy people, but that regular touch, let's say, with as many of your team as possible, is imperative, certainly through video rather than just text or emails, because I think you can, it's very easy. I've done it, so I'll admit it, so I will generalize and say I think everybody else would as well. It's very easy to hide behind an email or a text or a message, isn't it? You don't necessarily get an honest answer. So I think it's imperative that you touch base and do that via video if you can.
Thank you, Karl. And I know that Paul, who asked the question, is usually jetting all over the world, sometimes in the Far East, the Middle East, or in the Americas with his job, working with his teams. So being confined to barracks in York is a very different management style. So let's just go to Mags or Jay, just perhaps one of you, because of the problem we've had with feedback on your microphones. If one of you would like to unmute and just contribute towards that same question.
Yeah, exactly. So important to look people in the eye. A lot of the symptoms of stress are visual. So if you're looking at someone, you can see if they look shattered, if they look a bit dishevelled, if they just don't look themselves, really. It's much easier to pick that up when you're on video call and you can see them. I think as well, just if you have a biggish team and you have a communication framework in place, so that you know when you're going to be calling people, when you're going to be calling the team, and just do that at the same time, so there's a bit of normality and people know what to expect. So and just keep revisiting that frequency as well, and make sure it suits everybody, because I think the longer this goes on, we're going to need to adapt to that as well.
Thank you. The other thing I would add is there's quite a good app that I use with, I work with several government departments, and so I work with DEFRA and BAYS, for example, and we use a certain app where we ask the individuals that we coach and mentor to score themselves on 4 different measures every day. Now, they don't give us that data, that's personal to them, but it means that when we have a mentoring conversation, they can look through the trends of the previous week or month, and they can see where they were feeling on those 4 categories. And we can then focus into the key areas where they might need some more help. So I'll share that app in the email follow-up later on. But Richard, question from Richard Doyle. Getting troubled staff and indeed family to understand that there's always a solution to every problem has been helpful. So in Richard's experience, getting everyone to understand that there's a solution to their problem is helpful. What are the panel's views? Who wants to jump in?
I don't mind saying something there.
Thank you, Charlie.
Oh, no, sorry, Karl, you go.
No, go on.
Oh, sorry,
go on,
Karl,
Charlie.
I got it wrong. Sorry.
I'll go on then. Yeah, I think certainly from our examples of using the example that I gave earlier about that period of time with ourselves, I think, as Richard said, you know, I think making sure people know that they're not the only person that has ever felt that way, and making sure they know they've got an outlet, whether that's just us as individuals to speak to. I admit to some people that's difficult because in their eyes they still see you as a boss, as a leader, or whatever word they want to call you, which may be worse. But it's almost knowing that there is somebody there to speak to, knowing that they have our full support, and knowing that they can be open and honest about what's going on. You know, that pressure that lifts off the individual's shoulders is unbelievable. I've seen it firsthand with, like I say, at least a dozen of our team. And, you know, I think their biggest concern during those times were they almost had to come to work and put a mask over what was going on outside, and that they had to try and be their work self and carry on as if everything was okay. Now that exacerbates the problem. And obviously it's almost trying to quash those feelings, which anybody who's gone through these struggles themselves will know that is not a solution to actually solving them. So knowing that there's an outlet, knowing that they've got the confidence to be able to speak, whether it's to us, a colleague, or as we did a counselling service as well, you know, I agree with Richard's comments. It's worth its weight in gold.
Thank you, Karl. I appreciate that. Here's a slightly separate question for you, Charlie, if that's okay. You know, we're all seeing unprecedented times at the moment, and no one could have foreseen the pressures that particularly business directors, business owners are being loaded with at the moment. You talked about accepting the situation and building from there. What are the key steps you would suggest, or perhaps you could re-emphasize the key steps of how to build that personal resilience whilst maintaining balance in your work and life?
I guess the first thing comes from setting out your own goals, whether they're personal, whether they're from a business point of view. I think if you don't have anything to chase or to pursue, then those knockbacks can become even more serious. So the first case of acceptance is accepting that we all make mistakes. Things do happen, shit happens. It does. We do find ourselves in difficult situations, whatever that they may be. And therefore we set our target on that goal that we need to, that we're trying to pursue. So if I look at it from a personal point of view, again, back at my career, if I had a serious injury, then at least I kind of had a prognosis for, say, 8-9 months when I may be back on the field again. Likewise, I knew that from a goal kicking point of view, perhaps things wouldn't be sorted immediately, but I knew over a period of 6 months, then I was in a better frame of mind to be able to chase those, as opposed to always feeling like I was getting knocked back.
So it's not a case of accepting or expecting an overnight change, but having a medium-term plan in place and building towards that. Is that right?
Completely. You can, like I say, in regard to your goal setting, you can obviously set your crazy goal within 6 months, 12 months time. But then you need to be able to break that down into small achievable targets. And I think whether that's monthly, whether that's weekly, whether that's even daily, the things that you want to get out of those days, it starts you on that journey, however small those steps are. Because then you can also reward yourself with positivity when you do achieve those small wins.
That's a good point. So break the bigger goal down to smaller steps and reward yourself when you achieve those steps.
Yeah, completely.
Thank you. We'll go to Jane and Mags again, or Jane or Mags, because this is a question about technology. Obviously, working in your kitchen, as I am at the moment, there's always a balance when you've got the kids running in, or you've got lunch to make, or whatever there is. And I was talking to someone the other day who wanted a conference call at 6 o'clock on Friday night, and I'm going, I mean, that's crazy. Well, I'm not working till 6 o'clock on a Friday night at the moment. But they explained that as a couple, they're homeschooling their 2 kids, and so they're trying to do the homeschooling between 8 a.m. and 2 p.m, and then they're working themselves between 2 p.m. and 8 p.m, and trying to have some lunch together as a family in the middle. So I guess it's about balance. But Jane or Mags, have you got any other tips that you'd like to share about how to manage in that environment?
Yeah, I think as Mags said, the more adaptable employers can be, the better, because it's just not realistic to leave the kids to their own devices, is it? All day. And we've certainly got people who've got toddlers in families, and as much as you think you can walk away and do that email or bob on a call, you're going to get interrupted, or something, is going to happen, like an accident. So I think it's really setting out a schedule of what you can do in terms of work, and what support you've got with the children, and being open and discussing that openly with your employers. And I think the teams will probably be a mix of people who've got children who haven't. So, like you say, being able to work in the morning, and then someone perhaps cover the afternoon shift, and then you picking up again in the evening will work. It does mean that everybody's got to buy into that, obviously, both the managers perhaps that they're working with, and the team members. But I think if you've got that cooperation, then you should be able to come to some sort of arrangement. And I think also where you actually work, if you can make it as separate as you can, and get it away from the distractions, if at all possible, then that's going to help as well.
Yeah, hiding in the attic or the back bedroom or somewhere like that, just to build that barrier between the family life and the work life.
Yeah, if you can.
If you can, absolutely. Thank you. So we're going to wrap up in a moment, because I just wanted to come back to each of the panelists and just say, if there was one thing, one piece of advice, one really magic diamond that you could share with the group today. I'm going to start with you, Karl, just to give you some notice. If there were one magic diamond or one item you could share with the group today, which they could go away and implement in their life or their business or with their teams today, what would that be? Karl, over to you.
I would say, don't bury your head in the sand. Don't try and ignore something, because it won't go away, whether it's with yourself or a member of your team. Try and tackle the issue head on, and never underestimate the power of a difference that you could make to someone by actually offering that helping hand.
Thank you. Excellent. Don't bury your head in the sand. Thank you. Jane, back to you.
Thanks. Mags has dropped off, so you've got me again. But I would say actively listen to your team. So really listen if they're on the phone. Listen to what they're saying, and then communicate clearly. So there's lots of room for ambiguity when we're not in the same room. So be very clear on what you're saying when you go out there.
Active listening as opposed to passive listening. I think that's a very important point. Thank you very much, Jane. And Charlie, let's finish off with your good self.
The one thing for me is about having perspective. Whenever you find yourself in a really difficult situation, ask yourself just this one question: will it matter in a week? Will it matter in a month? Will it matter in a year? If you look back in a year's time, you probably won't even remember that day itself. So I'd say have some perspective on what you are focusing on right now.
Thank you. Focus on that with some perspective. Thank you very much indeed. So let's wrap that up then. So I'd like to thank all the speakers. Thank you very much for committing your time to helping the Institute of Directors group here. It's much appreciated. Charlie, Karl, Jane and Mags. And unfortunately we lost Charlotte, but I've dropped Charlotte's LinkedIn profile in the chat, so you can all see who she is and connect with her separately if you wish to do so, as I've done with all the speakers. It's all in the chat there, and we'll follow up with an email with all their contact details if you want to connect with any of our speakers today. I'd like to thank Helena for running the technology and making it all happen smoothly from behind the scenes. And I'd just like to invite you all as friends of the Institute of Directors to our regular weekly fellowship forum, which we run every Thursday morning at 10 a.m. It's again a Zoom call where we can help people with your business issues, what's going on for you, and using the wisdom of the group, we can help share those issues, share those problems, and come up with solutions as a group. So that again will come out on the email afterwards from Helena. And for the rest of you, I want to say thank you again to the speakers. Thank you to all participants jumping in, particularly I think Pat from Devon. I think you're the most distant who's joined us, which proves the value of Zoom. We don't have to meet in London, we can meet virtually, which is brilliant. And thank you all for your time, and I wish you all a great day and a great weekend coming up as well. So thank you, have a good day.